I have to admit, I didn't expect this. My car was working intermittently. She needed repairs, but I didn't have the money for it. I probably shouldn't have ridden it, but I had no choice. I closed the door and saw the looks of others as I got out of the car. My BMW didn't fit into this area. I headed to the Secretary of State's office. Upon entering the office, probably judging by my appearance, the security guard directed me to the license renewal line. I shook my head, and he looked at me with confusion. "Do you need to take a new photo?" he asked. I shook my head. "Then why are you here?" he asked. Almost every head in the crowded office turned to listen. Most of them didn't even try to pretend that they weren't interested. "I came to register for government assistance," I said quietly. "You know, Dole, I have no income and no money, and I'm going to starve, Dole. Or is it when they just came and threw me and all my stuff out of the lousy apartment I moved into after about being forced to leave the house I thought I'd live in for the rest of my life, an allowance? Maybe it's when I can't find God knows what job to save my ass because no one wants to hire me, an allowance." "Calm down, madam," he said in a nervous voice. "Half the people in this office are registered for or are already receiving benefits. I know what you need. Go there and get one of these forms. Fill it out completely and put it in the inbox at the counter. Then have a seat and someone will call you." "How long do I have to wait until I'm called?" I asked. "Not very long," he said. "Shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 hours at worst." He wasn't joking. People were sleeping, waiting for a call. There was a magazine rack in the corner, but it was empty. My impression was that most magazines were not returned after people had read them. Everyone in this place was constantly looking at me. I knew they were wondering why the hell someone like me, dressed like me, was here. It's a long story and actually quite funny. It all started exactly 2 years ago, next Tuesday. My name is Melinda Conrad. Okay, I know what you're thinking. You think my name sounds a lot like Mel Conrad, that guy who got rich last year and gives all his money to charity and everything. Well, you're right. He is my husband. Okay, technically he's my ex-husband. And you know what else? I got a lousy deal. I'm directly responsible for making him a fucking gazillionaire, and I have nothing to prove it. Okay, maybe I'm not directly responsible, but if I hadn't forced him to divorce me, he wouldn't have gotten rich. So I deserve some recognition, don't I? 2 years ago, we were really happy. We were never rich. We were your typical, average middle-class family. My husband Melvin Conrad, my daughter Melissa Conrad, and I were 3 peas in a pod. We were a very close family. We had a wonderful house. This is the one I was forced to leave. Then I had to move into this crappy apartment that I had just been evicted from, but that's another story. We loved each other very much, as if there was no tomorrow. My husband wasn't particularly excited, but he was nice enough, and he loved me. He tried very hard to provide for our family, and as I said, we were comfortable. Our daughter had just finished her first year at a state university when this happened to me. There are so many names for the same thing now, but you know what I had. Some call it a midlife crisis, others call it hormonal imbalance, and still others call it empty nest syndrome. These are all great names for a spoiled woman gets bored and does stupid things she usually regrets. Sometimes this affects men too, so you guys don't think you're safe or immune to it. When you see a graying man in his 40s driving a shitty sports car with a 20-year-old blonde next to him, chances are he has it too. So, I invited my husband to dinner because I needed to tell him something. Something terrible happened, and I needed to clear the air. I look attractive enough, at least. At 40, I could still attract attention on a good day. I'm a little heavier than when we first met, but it's all in good places. Mel loved me so much, and I was so stupid. He arrived a little later, no more than 5 minutes, so I didn't scold him for it. He smiled at me. His face still lit up like a Christmas tree every time he saw me. It seemed like weeks had passed since our last meeting, but in fact it was only this morning. I was very nervous when he hugged me. I had butterflies in my stomach then. Something told me I was making a huge mistake. He sat down opposite me. His expression was one of absolute happiness. I was sure he thought it was good. I felt so bad about breaking the heart of the man I had lived with, loved, and raised my daughter with for over 20 years, but I had no choice. It was him or my luck. "How was your day, dear?" he asked. Heck, he was the one who went out and worked all day. What was he thinking about? What was I doing all day? Did he think I was working on a cure for cancer or trying to solve the crisis in the Middle East? I got up at 9 and loaded the dishwasher. I threw the laundry in the washing machine and my day was half over. "Mel, I want a divorce," I told him. He spat out the sip of water he had just drunk right in my face. I'm sure it was an accident, but it ruined my makeup and my hair. I just sat there with water and drool running down my face while he tried to catch his breath. "Are you serious?" he asked quietly. "Very," I replied with as much dignity as possible, considering I looked like a raccoon with my waterproof mascara proving to be anything but waterproof. He stood up, wiped his mouth and said, "My lawyer will contact you." The pain and suffering on his face hurt me. I felt like the lowest grade of sludge on earth. Everything in me, every fiber of my being told me to get on my knees and tell him it was a joke. But I didn't move. He turned to leave after throwing some bills on the table. "Wait, Mel," I said. "It wasn't supposed to work out this way. Do you want to talk about it and ask me some questions? We need to talk about how the divorce is going to work." He turned to me and looked with curiosity, asking, "Why?" I was amazed. I went over this situation in my head hundreds of times, and none of them had such a reaction. He didn't get angry or cry. He didn't demand to know why or threaten me. He just accepted what I said and moved on. What will it change? Will it make me feel better? Will it change you? I doubt both. I'm sure if you do this, it means you've found someone else and want to be with him. Then, how I feel about you is clearly not enough to change your mind, although it wouldn't matter. If you do that, you've already slept with him, right? I nodded my head and said, "But—" He interrupted me. "That means you are no longer of interest to me," he said coldly. "Okay, do you want questions? Should I do a DNA test, or is Melissa mine?" "God, Mel," I said. "For heaven's sake, of course she's yours. What do you think of me?" "You really wouldn't want to know the answer to that question," he said. "Goodbye, Melinda." Then he turned and left. He didn't seem as angry or upset as I thought. "Damn it, Mel," I screamed after him. "You're not even going to try to fight for me." My voice was heard throughout the restaurant. He turned again and from 3 tables away gave me the answer. "Why, Melinda?" he asked. "I can't change your feelings. Who am I to tell you that your feelings are wrong? You obviously don't love me the way I love you. If you did, we wouldn't be doing this. Because you don't love me anymore, I need to get over you and move on. Besides, I only fight for what I want, and after what you said tonight, that doesn't include you anymore. I wish you the best. I'm not going to get in your way." Everyone in the restaurant was looking at me as Mel headed for the door. I felt a shiver down my spine. I've read about such sensations. People say this happens to you when someone walks on the ground you will be buried under. This probably does mean that, as I said, I made a huge mistake. My heart and my mind were screaming at me, but then I couldn't listen to them. I called the waiter and asked him where the women's room was. When I returned home that night, it was clear from the empty drawers and closet that my husband had left. Any opportunity to undo this was lost. I had the worst headache imaginable. I took my cell phone and called Greg. "He will make me feel better." "Yes," he replied. "It's me," I said. I told him. "Cool," he said. "How did he take it? Did he scream and try to beg you to stay? Did he hit you and beat you up?" "No," I said. "He just got up and walked away from me. He was very calm. He took it well, considering the circumstances." "Do you want me to come over and have sex with you until you pass out?" he asked. No," I said. "I just ruined a 20-year relationship with a man who worshipped the ground I walked on. I think I need time alone." "Okay, see you," he said, and he hung up. I think at that moment I realized that I had greatly underestimated my huge mistake. I knew all the reasons why I wanted a divorce. Greg was younger, much younger, and he made me feel alive. At 29, Greg was 11 years younger than me and 9 years older than my daughter. He was wild and untamed. He was everything Mel wasn't. I sat down on the edge of our huge double bed. When I looked at the bed, it never seemed so big or empty. I poured myself a glass of wine and thought about the new direction my life would now take. Somewhere around midnight, tossing and turning and unable to sleep, I pulled out one of our old photo albums and flipped through the pages, recalling 22 years of memories with Mel. The next morning it was worse. I woke up and wondered why I would even get up. I sat at the table and just watched as a cup of my favorite coffee turned into a thick liquid at room temperature. I don't know why I didn't move, but I had no reason to do anything. I kept replaying my conversation in the restaurant with Mel the night before and the conversation with Greg in my head. Mel started the evening looking at me as if the sun was shining out of my ass. By the end of the evening, he looked at me completely differently. He looked at me the same way he would a problem or project at work, as if I was just one more problem that needed to be solved in order to get to the end of his day. And Greg completely failed. What he should have done was offer to just come and hug me or be with me. When someone experiences great emotional loss, they need to know that someone cares about them. I knew Greg was young, so I was lenient with him. Teaching him to become the man I thought he could be was a big part of the excitement. I knew I had hurt Mel badly. This is what bothered me so much. But I was sure that he would get better eventually. Who am I kidding? I knew he would be unhappy without me. But at that time, I was only thinking about my feelings. My service life is over. Damn, I gave this man the best years of my life. We have done our part to continue the family line. We raised a child. Our duty to society is over. It was time to have fun. I wanted to be happy, but I didn't want to wait until my golden years. Why not be happy while I'm still young enough to know what happiness is? I woke up in my hotel room the next morning after she told me. At first, I didn't know where I was. The room was dark and the sheets smelled different. They smelled antiseptic, like medicine, so they were probably clean enough. They didn't smell like the smell that is the culmination of weeks of washing with any suitable soap, or traces of bodily fluids, gases, sex, tears, and spilled food that someone tried to clean from them. In other words, they didn't smell like love. I sat up in bed and remembered where I was and why I was here before I completely lost my head and reached for her. My mind remembered that she wouldn't be here, but my body and my heart still missed her. I reminded myself and steeled myself for what I had to do. I had a lot to do before I could allow myself to sink into the depression that I knew would inevitably come. I was thinking about calling work today and just staying here to whine. But sooner or later I have to go outside, and today was as good a day as any. Before I turned on the light and broke the blanket of darkness that I had thrown over myself to keep my tears hidden, I made a list of things to do for the day. I needed to call a lawyer. The guy I usually dealt with didn't do divorce or family law. Perhaps he could recommend someone. I needed to find a more permanent place to live. I was probably leaning towards either giving Melinda the house or selling it. Whatever option was best for me, I didn't see the point in making any decisions based on Melinda's needs or convenience. I needed to call my daughter to make sure she could always reach me. I wasn't going to make her choose between me and her, but I also wanted her to know that I still wanted to be as big a part of her life as she would allow. I needed to separate Melinda and I financially. I'll let the judge and lawyers work it out, but I wasn't going to give her a penny more than I had to. With that in mind, I needed to make sure my assets remained mine. We also had some social obligations that I needed to tactfully inquire about. I didn't intend to become a recluse, but I really didn't want to see anyone or try to go out and become some kind of parody of myself, pretending everything was fine while the pieces of my wounded heart said otherwise. With this in mind, I called my father-in-law to talk about the barbecue we were supposed to go to the weekend of their anniversary. "Hi, Bob," I said when he answered the phone. "Mel, "How are you?" he asked. "You're still bringing Dos Equis, aren't you?" "Bob, this is exactly what I'm calling to talk about," I said. "I'd really like to wish you and Jean a happy anniversary. Your marriage is something I wish I could have had at your age. But I can't make it on Saturday, so I was hoping you'd let me take you out on Friday night instead." "Stuck at work, huh?" he said. "I remember those days. Don't let it get you down, Mel. So we're going to have a double date, huh? I haven't been on one in years. Sounds like fun. Maybe you'll let me do a few dances with your wife. I've always liked young women." "Bob, it'll just be me and you two. I'm not dating anyone right now. But if this makes things awkward for you, just tell me and I'll send you a gift or something," I said. "Mel, what the hell is going on?" he asked. "Your voice hasn't sounded the same since you started that damn call." "Bob, your daughter asked me to have dinner with her last night," I said. "During dinner, she told me that she wants a divorce. She has found someone else and wants to be with him." "What?" he shouted. "What did she do? Something else must have happened. Did you do something to her? Did you cheat on her?" "No, sir," I said quietly. "Mel, I'll call you back. I need—" he began. "Please, Bob, I don't want to cause problems. I'm sure she'll tell you when the time comes," I said. "I don't want to distract you or mar the occasion in any way. What we should be celebrating now is that you and Jean have lived together for 45 years. We should honor those who were able to overcome everything and not be divided over those who couldn't. I'll call you next week and we can talk. I just didn't want you or Jean to think that I didn't appreciate what you two built." One thing done, I thought as I dialed Melissa's daughter's number. Luckily for me, she wasn't on the phone. I could have called her on her cell phone, but I really didn't want to talk to her. I simply left my mobile number and said that she could contact me there or at her work number. Another call, and I was recommended a divorce lawyer. The woman on the phone sounded ominous, but agreed to meet me later in the morning. I took out my laptop and started looking for apartments and apartments. Most of them were the same except for the prices. Somehow, I didn't see the point in buying space in a building that you will never actually own. I'll probably end up wanting to buy another house, so renting was an okay option. Hell, I could even buy out Melinda's share of our house. I took a quick shower and dressed in my usual business attire. I didn't really like ties, but I could wear a sweater and jacket better than most. I decided to also think about getting a gym membership. Ultimately, I would probably want to start improving the property if I was going to try to get another woman interested in taking a chance on me. I went outside, and for the first time since Melinda shocked me yesterday, I smiled. There was a woman with a little boy in the hotel parking lot. She had a hard time getting him away from my Mustang. There were 3 things that made me smile every time I looked at them. My wife, Melinda, was the first. My daughter, Melissa, was second. The last one was my '09 Mustang GT. It never failed. Every time I looked at this car, I just smiled and shook my head. It reminded me of the time when I was a kid, rolling my Hot Wheels cars across our living room floor. Commuting to work has always been a pleasure, and today was no exception. It was a chance to focus on something other than how bad I felt at the moment. I walked into my office, and my assistant Joyce pounced on me like a hound on a fox. "Melinda already called you twice this morning," she said. "She says she can't reach your cell phone." "Joyce, have a seat," I said, motioning for her to sit in my seat at my desk. She sat down and smiled widely. "Have you finally realized that I am the reason for your success and decided to reward me fairly?" she asked. Joyce was my friend in addition to being my assistant. We worked together for so long that it was almost like a kinship. "Joyce, remember the dinner I was in a hurry to leave last night?" I asked. She nodded. "Someone must have had fun last night," she said. "If anyone had fun last night, it certainly wasn't me," I said. "All I got was a kick in the teeth. Melinda told me she wanted a divorce." Joyce looked at me and read through my pretense. "That bastard," she said. "You probably didn't even know about it, did you?" I shook my head. Joyce stood up and pushed me into a chair. She massaged my shoulders, trying to express her sympathy. "If you need anything, just let me know," she said. "For now, I'm not asking you to lie. Can you just tell her the truth?" "Tell her I'm not taking her calls," I said. Joyce looked at me and nodded. I saw that she wanted to ask more. Everyone always wants to know the details. But she saw that I didn't want to talk about it. She was kind and smart enough not to put pressure on me. Before lunch, I grabbed a folder and put copies of all our financial documents in it. I left the office and went to meet with the lawyer. Her office was not what I expected. I thought it would be a large office building and that it would house all or most of a large law firm. I was wrong on both counts. It was a small one-story office, part of a shopping center. On one side of her office was a small medical center. On the other side is a branch of Fredericks of Hollywood. Further down the mall, there was a liquor store. All businesses seemed to be thriving. At first glance, the combination of business types seemed strange until I thought about it more. After that, I realized that there was actually one type of business missing here. If you are having problems in your marriage, you could come here and buy lingerie for your wife. You could plan a nice romantic evening and buy something from Fredericks to try and spice things up. If that doesn't work, you have a divorce lawyer at hand. You find out she cheated on you, so you go to the clinic for STD testing, and then to the liquor store to drown your sorrows. The mall offered a fast, convenient, and comprehensive shopping solution. The only thing missing was a therapist or marriage counselor. Perhaps a detective agency and a gun store would be useful too. I opened the door and entered. An attractive older woman asked me my name and the purpose of my visit. "Melvin Conrad, meeting Ann Wilson," I said. "I have an appointment for noon." She smiled and told me to sit down and Miss Wilson would contact me soon. The woman was at least 60, but she was still charming. Almost as soon as I was seated, Ann Wilson opened her office door and beckoned me to enter. Ann Wilson was a large woman with long black hair and piercing blue eyes. She looked at me with that look that all predators use when inspecting possible prey. "Tell me a story," she said. This statement surprised me. I looked at her in bewilderment. She simply raised one eyebrow higher and continued to look at me. "Okay," I said. "Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs." "Very funny," she grinned. "Tell me about your divorce and the reasons why you came to this, Mr. Kazare Conrad. Time is money. I don't want to waste yours or mine, but it is unlikely that I will take your case." My shoulders sagged, and I began to tell her the long story of my marriage to Melinda. When I got to the part about dinner the night before, she hissed and took a deep breath. "Wait," she said sharply. "What did she do?" "She took us out to dinner at her favorite restaurant and told me she wanted a divorce because she had found someone new, and she had already had sex with him," I said. Miss Wilson stood up. "Have you ever cheated on her?" she asked, leaning over and looking at me carefully. "Never, ma'am," I said. "Have you ever hit her?" she asked. "Okay, forget it. You just don't seem like that type." "What did you do when she told you that?" There wasn't really anything I could do, ma'am. I left money on the table for her dinner if she decided to eat. Then I went home. I packed my things and checked into the hotel," I said. Miss Wilson shook her head. "It wasn't the smartest decision. Your leaving will probably give her temporary housing rights until we can reach an agreement." "Is the house in your name, her name, or both?" she asked, quickly writing something down on a legal pad. "In my name," I said. "Melinda doesn't work outside the home." "Then why the hell did you leave?" she asked, shaking her head. "You're just as bad as women, damn it." She threw the notebook across the room and looked at me. For a moment, I felt like my 3rd-grade teacher was trying to get me to memorize my multiplication tables. That feeling of, damn, how many times do we have to repeat this? She seemed to expect me to know the ins and outs of divorce laws and procedures. I stood up, and she turned her head sharply to look at me with the same fierce gaze. "Where are you going?" she asked sharply. "Well, I thought you didn't want to take my case because I did everything wrong," I said. Suddenly, her gaze softened, and she pressed a button on her desk. She spoke into the intercom and told her assistant, who was also her aunt, to bring the cart. A lovely older woman walked into the office with a cart full of coffee and fresh donuts. Miss Wilson poured herself a cup and took 2 donuts. I also drank a cup of black coffee. "You didn't do anything wrong, Mr. Kaiser Conrad," she said. "That's why I'm so angry. I don't usually represent men in divorce cases because they're usually at fault. A typical scenario involves a man who has cheated on his wife multiple times, usually with some trophy woman. When his wife can't take it anymore, if she can't bear this, he tries to rob her during the divorce, leaving her without money and a roof over her head. I've built a reputation for getting the best deal for my clients in divorce, so now I have a lot of men trying to use me to get a better deal when I don't think they deserve it. Why the hell should they have theirs cake and eat it too? If they cheat and ruin the marriage, they have to pay for it. You have provided for this woman your entire life. You have provided her with a good life and home, judging by your address and the fact that your daughter is in college. After reviewing your financial records, I see that you have been a good provider. And lastly, you, not a very good actor, Mr. Paul Conrad. You're trying to act like everything's fine, but I can see it's destroyed you, and you're just trying to keep moving. Hell, you're not even angry yet, and the pain hasn't set in yet. What scares me the most is that you don't even try to resist what she wants. She says she wants a divorce. You didn't even force her to apply. You did it because she asked. She is the one who cheats, but you go home and move out of the house you worked hard for instead of telling her to leave. She should move in with her lover or her parents if they are still alive. Mr. Boss Conrad, I will definitely take your case. Someone needs to protect you, even if only to prevent you from giving her everything you have. We spent the rest of the day sorting through my financial records and assessing the value of our assets to determine the best path forward for me. There were several times when Miss Wilson just looked at me like I was stupid and asked questions like, "So, you want to just give her the house while you pay the mortgage? In other words, you want to pay for her to live there? Who is she having sex with?" "Well, probably not," I said. But the meaning of her words began to dawn on me. "Why are you giving her almost all your savings?" she asked. "Well, she'll need money to live," I said. "She doesn't have a job. It's just money. I can always earn more." I thought Miss Wilson was going to hit me. She didn't work because she spent most of her life sitting on her butt while you provided for her. She has a college degree so she can get a job. She's someone who wanted a change in her life. Let's give it to her. I think we should get a 6,040 division of the property in your favor. We will pay her child support for 6 months, no longer. All other assets should be divided equally, including the house, and your 401k will remain yours, she said. I left the office feeling overwhelmed. I had no idea that everything would be so difficult. Wilson gave me the contact information for a good real estate agency to list the house for sale. She felt it would be best to put the house on the market right away. Usually the woman was allowed to stay in the house until the children reached adulthood. Our daughter already lived on campus, so there was no need to delay the sale. And since I didn't need Melinda's consent to sell the house, the sooner I put it on the market, the sooner this will all be over. I walked back to the office and saw Melinda's car in the parking lot when I pulled up. I saw her get out of the car, so I drove away. I still wasn't ready to talk to her. When I woke up this morning, I felt terrible about how things turned out between Mel and me. I decided that maybe I should just talk to Mel about it. I needed to let him know that I didn't mean to offend him. I just wanted to move on with my life. I tried to call him, but he didn't answer his mobile. I tried to call his office and Joyce initially told me he wasn't there yet. I realized that I was stupid. Mel never came to the office early. He always told me that every moment away from me was torture, so sitting in the office when he could be with me was pointless. I called back after 9 in the morning and asked Joyce if he had arrived. Finally, she told me that he was there, but was not taking calls from me. It was difficult for me to digest this. "Is he really busy, Joyce?" I asked. "No busier than usual. she said. Actually, I don't think he's that busy. Then can I talk to him? I asked. In all the years Joyce worked for Mel, I never heard her behave or speak in any way inappropriately. I've seen her talk to difficult clients and remain calm even after someone else would have hung up long ago. Damn it, Melinda, she screamed. He doesn't want to talk to you. What did you expect? You ripped his heart out, and now you want to talk. If you ask me, he's happy to get rid of you. Don't call here again. Then she hung up. I didn't even consider the possibility that Mel might be unhappy. He seemed fine last night, but actually it was good for both of us. The fact that he didn't want to talk to me hurt me. I was about to call Joyce back and remind her that she works for Mel, not the other way around, and he should be the one to tell me if I can call him, when my phone beeped. I had another call. I answered the phone and heard my mother's voice. Melinda, what the hell is going on between you two? She asked. What do you mean, Mom? I asked. Your father says you and Mel are having problems, she said. Do I need to come there and sort it out? There's nothing that needs to be taken apart, Mom, I said. Melissa's grown up now and I just feel like I need to move on. I'm young enough to do something else with my life. I'm bored. I need to spread my wings and fly. Melinda, you actually mean spread your legs and have sex, don't you? She asked. I was shocked. I had never heard my mother use such language. Melinda, do you remember my sister, your Aunt Katie? She asked. I just muttered to let her know I heard her. When Katie was about your age, she started spreading her legs for the milkman. Her husband eventually found out and beat the milkman to a pulp. He forced Katie to sleep in the basement on a cot for a year. Mom, what does this have to do with me? I asked. Tell Mel that your father and I will buy him a bunk for you, she said. Mom, that's not true, I said. Mal and I will both be happier. This man loves you, she said sharply. She snapped. You will never find anyone else who will love you so much. Your father said he sounded like he was barely staying afloat. How could you do this to someone who took care of you most of your life? Mom, he can handle this, I said. Then she started muttering to herself about stupid children and hung up. I began to realize that everyone was trying to make me look bad, simply because I wanted to get out of a bad situation. What was I supposed to do? Donate my happiness on the altar of St. Chalk. To hell with this idea, I moved on. It was Friday. That evening, I was planning to go out with Greg. I was excited because for the first time, I didn't have to hide. No more sneaking around, having sex in cars, or getting laid whenever we can get together. But I wanted to settle this issue with Mel, so I decided to go to him. The security guards in the building did not let me in. I smelled Joyce's hands there. As soon as I got back into my car, Mel's Mustang pulled into the parking lot. I got out of the car and waved to him. He pulled out of the parking lot and drove away. I was so used to the fact that he was happy to see me at any time that I just sat there in shock. I went home to get ready for the date. I showered and used my favorite bath scents and perfumes. I wanted to drive Greg crazy. I put on a dress that I liked. It was a very rich blue color that looked really good against my long brown hair and blue eyes. I had worn the dress for a long time, but it still suited me well. Maybe not as good as when I was 30, but they never complained to me. I spent a lot of time on my hair and makeup. I wanted Greg to be really proud to have me on his arm. I had to let people know that there was a reason he was with me and not some hot 25-year-old guy. I had just finished brushing my hair when the door slammed. A lot of things came to my mind. I thought maybe Mel was back, and I got angry. I got up from the dressing table and went to see who it was. Mom, are you fucking crazy? My daughter Melissa screamed. She walked up the stairs and looked at me like I was crazy. Where is my father? Judging by the expression on her face, you would have thought that I had killed him. I don't know, Lissa, I stammered. We ended up having a big argument about what I was doing. Why the hell did everyone think I was making a mistake? Don't talk to me like that, young lady, I shouted at her. I needed to take back control of the situation. I am your mother, and you should treat me with some respect. If you can't do that, then maybe you shouldn't come to my house or expect me to continue paying for your education. Mom, if you acted like you deserved respect, I would give it to you. Right now, I think your hormones are out of balance, and you are ruining your life. If I didn't love you and didn't want the best for you, I would just let you piss in the wind. On the other hand, this is also my house, and Dad pays for it, not you. Dad also pays for my education, not you. Just as I was preparing to respond to her words, the doorbell rang. She walked to the door and opened it. She looked at Greg as if he had just arrived from Mars. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm Greg, baby," he said. "Who's Greg, baby?" she asked, looking at him strangely. "What kind of name is Greg, baby?" "Mom, you're kidding, right?" she asked. "I need to take you to the doctor." "Come in, Greg," I said, looking past her. "And who is this cute creature?" Greg asked. He hadn't taken his eyes off Melissa since he arrived. "Greg Martin, meet my daughter Melissa Conrad," I said. Greg extended his hand to Melissa. "Don't worry, Fonzie," she snapped. "You won't be here long. Mom, can I talk to you upstairs?" She grabbed my hand and pulled me up the stairs. "You can't be serious," she said. "What is he, 25? "He's 29, I said. "What does he do for a living?" she asked. I didn't really know, so I shrugged. "Melissa, we can talk about all this later," I said. "When I get home from our date, we'll sit down and talk about all this." "Mom, I won't be here," she said. "I'm not going to stay in this house until you come to your senses or Dad decides to move back." Then she left, slamming the door. I went downstairs, determined not to let her ruin my evening. "Where are we going, Greg?" I asked. Greg's car wouldn't start. On the way to my house, he had to start the car twice, so I drove us. We ended up in a dirty club where he wanted to go. He danced with me once, as well as with many other people, including a couple of times when he danced with 2 other male friends. He didn't introduce me to any of his friends. My dress was ruined when someone spilled beer on it. When we left, I had no money left. I took us home. Greg arrived, and we spent the rest of the evening having sex. This was different from the first few times. It wasn't as good, even though he did the same thing. We were doing it 3 times. Each time the next morning, I awoke early and found Greg moving his things into my house. "We'll be very happy, babe," he said. I was a little angry because he didn't ask my permission to move, but when I thought about it, I realized that all couples go through these little arguments and disagreements. I told him about my parents' barbecue, and he said he wouldn't go. This was the beginning of our first quarrel. I couldn't believe how bad the day had gone. Maybe it's because I compared him to Mel. It was unfair to both of them. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Mel showed up. I heard the rumble of his car and realized it was him. I ran down the stairs to try to prevent a confrontation. I saw the 2 of them standing on the porch and talking. Mel then turned and left before I could talk to him. I ran after him along the roadway, calling him, but he didn't even slow down. "What did he want?" I asked. "He's a good guy," Greg said, "and his car is so cool. He just said to treat you well and hope we're happy. He came by to pick up some more of his things. Said he came now because he thought we'd be at your parents' place by now. He said something about how we'd have to leave soon." "What?" I asked. "What are you talking about?" "Why are you yelling at me?" he asked. He left in a huff, and when I entered the house, he was sitting on my white linen sofa drinking beer. I just looked at him. "I'll go with you to your parents if you let me have a party," he said. He explained to me that he wanted to invite some of his friends to introduce them to me and show how happy we would be together. I was so glad that he agreed to go to my parents' barbecue that I immediately agreed. I was also glad because we seemed to have learned to negotiate and make decisions as equals. This was a big step in our relationship. I won't go into detail, but my parents and most of my family and friends hated Greg. My father eventually kicked him out of the house. Well, my father just told him to leave. It was my brother-in-law who took him by the collar and led him to the door. I told my dad that he was wrong for making Greg leave. He told me that I could leave with him. I told him he was greatly exaggerating. All Greg did was fart loudly a few times and tell a few stupid jokes. He was just trying to make friends in an unusual situation with a group of people he didn't know. He might have been a little loud and uncouth, but I was going to spend the rest of my life with him, so they had to adjust. When we got home, I noticed that more of Mel's things were missing. He left me a card with his lawyer's name and number so I could pass this information on to my lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer yet. Greg and I stayed home Saturday night. He invited a few people over, and they sat around playing games on the gaming system he connected to my TV. I was alone most of the evening until they left. Then Greg and I had sex, and he fell asleep. On Monday, I woke up and asked Greg if he had to go to work or something. I wanted some time to clean the house. It hadn't been this messy since Melissa was a teenager and had a party. Then I found out that Greg was between jobs, or in other words, unemployed. The doorbell rang and Greg answered. "This is for you, baby," he shouted. I walked downstairs, still trying to wrap my head around the parameters of my new relationship. I noticed Greg looking with interest at whoever was standing at the door. When I approached the door, I saw a young woman. She was about 20 years old and quite nice. She had one of those thin briefcases at her feet and a folder in her hands. She was chewing gum and looked bored. She looked like she sold magazine subscriptions to earn money for school. She looked up at me as I approached and asked me by name. I was sure she got my name from one of those internet lists. The companies that compile these lists buy and sell addresses and names so they can sell you products they think will interest you. "Melinda Conrad," she asked in a completely indifferent voice. "Yes," I said, "but I am not." "You have been handed it," she said. She handed me a stack of documents, and before I could ask her anything else, she turned and walked away. She was still chewing gum and looking into her briefcase for another file. She looked at her watch, got into the car, and drove away. "She has a really nice ass," Greg said, watching her all the way to her car. I looked at the document she handed me. I guess I expected Mel to just sit and wait while I decided how our divorce would go. Obviously, he didn't wait. The card he left yesterday with information about his lawyer was still upstairs. He was moving forward with the divorce while I was beginning to doubt whether I really wanted him. In addition to the divorce papers, there was a notice that Mel was selling our house as part of the divorce settlement. I had 30 days to find a new place to live or make other arrangements. There were also details about how, if I wanted, I could buy out Mel's share of our current home. Mel proposed divorce due to irreconcilable differences. There was no provision for child support because Melissa was over 18 years of age. He intended to continue supporting her, but the documents indicated that her agreement would be separate from mine, and I would have to find out the details from her. I knew there would be no problems there. Mel loved his daughter. She'll probably be better off than me. He offered me a small alimony of 6 months and 40% of our savings and checking accounts. He took me out of his pension plan. If I do not accept this proposal, he will file for divorce due to my infidelity, to which I have already admitted. There is too much information to list everything. Since I was the one asking for a divorce, he also wasn't going to pay for my lawyer. This meant that my attorney fees would eat into any settlement I might have received. There was also the fact that, under the circumstances, Mel was as generous to me as possible in the matter of the house. He could have just kicked me out. When we first bought the house, my name wasn't on the mortgage because I didn't want it. We weren't sure we'd be able to pay our bills, and if we lost our house or had to file for bankruptcy, we decided that a good credit history for one of us might be helpful. Since the house was entirely in Mel's name, he could have just kicked me out. Especially since I cheated on him and brought Greg to live in the house. As I was thinking about all this, I realized I had a problem. For over 20 years, Mel took care of every detail of our lives. He paid all the bills, took care of the mortgage, bought the cars, and did everything else. I wasn't sure I knew how to find a new place to live, let alone figure out how to pay for it. Mel also proved himself to be a gentleman by not draining our bank accounts. He took only 50% from both the savings and checking accounts. This meant that all the money in the accounts was not mine. If I spent more than 40% of my original total balance, I would have to pay it back. The big problem was at home. Our house was worth about $2,000. This meant that if the house sold for that amount, I would have received $80,000. But if I wanted to live in it, I would have to pay Mel $120,000. I wasn't sure I could get a mortgage or loan for that amount, especially since I had no work history and no credit history of my own. I also couldn't take out a loan against the property because, again, the house wasn't in my name, so I had no equity on paper. I needed to find the cheapest lawyer possible. I needed to talk to Mel to see if there was any way to work this out. Perhaps I could just give him the house in exchange for the right to live in it until I got back on my feet. It would also give me a few months to figure out what I want to do about the divorce. Mel and I really needed to talk. The problem was that he just didn't want to talk to me. I decided that I needed to find someone who could mediate for me. I called my dad and asked him to call Mel on my behalf. He refused. "Melinda, you are my daughter. I am truly shocked and disappointed by this whole situation. This man was a much better son-in-law than I could have expected. I really need to call him soon. I need to apologize to him for our last phone conversation. He called me a couple days ago, trying to arrange a time to spend with your mother and I on our anniversary. I finally found out from him why he couldn't come to the barbecue. He didn't come because he didn't want there to be any drama or a distraction from our anniversary. I couldn't believe he was talking about what you did to him." I could hear my mother in the background. "Then you came with that damn bully and ruined our party. To be honest, I wished Mel had come to the barbecue instead of you. So if you're trying to talk me into getting you a date, forget it. He's suffering enough as it is. Give it to the man. Peace. You wanted a divorce. He gives it to you. Although if I were Mel, married to you, and you tried to do something like that, I would kick you out." Then my father hung up on me. I decided to call my daughter and see if she could help me. She ultimately wanted us to get back together. Melissa was even less helpful than her grandparents. She didn't want to talk to me at all. I called her cell phone several times, and each time the call went to voicemail. The third time I tried to call, she changed her answering machine greeting just for me. "Hi, this is Melissa. I can't take your call right now. Leave a message after the tone unless you're my ex-mother, in which case you shouldn't call or leave any messages because I don't want to hear from you. Bye." There is a price for selfishness, and although I didn't realize it, I was just starting to pay for it. Ann Wilson handled the divorce cases. She was a wonderful woman. Despite her initial attitude towards me during our first meeting, I noticed that she was very caring and concerned about my well-being. She called me every day to let me know what was going on and what I could expect as a result. She told me immediately after Melinda received the summons. She also asked me what I wanted to do in each situation. Some of the things she wanted me to do didn't seem right to me. She suggested that I take a long vacation from work. That way I would have no income and maybe I could avoid paying child support to Melinda. I liked the work, but the thought of having any connection with Melinda for any period of time was unbearable for me. There were a few ideas that I often wished I could spend more time on. There were also a few places I wanted to visit. Maybe the idea of taking time off from work wasn't as bad as I originally thought. "Dad, this place is perfect. It's as big as a damn house. There are 3 bedrooms, and I love the pool outside. The workout room means you don't have to join the gym. I think you should take it," my friend said. "Daughter Melissa, I took Lissa to see a condo I was thinking about renting. I've already decided that I like this place." The monthly rent was high, but they had both semi-annual and annual leases. Now, a 6-month lease while I looked for a house seemed ideal for me. Melissa has been wonderful these past few days. She lived with her grandparents to be close to me and commuted back and forth to school every other day. Without her support, I'm not sure I would have made it through. Joyce was wonderful too. She started caring about me, and although it was too early, She had already started trying to set me up with someone else. Just because you chose one apple with a worm doesn't mean you have to give up apples, she said. It will only take me 15 or 20 minutes to find someone you can be happy with. Over the past week, I have been suffering less. I wasn't as angry at Melinda, and in some ways, I could understand her point of view. If she really wasn't happy with me, she deserved to be with someone who could make her happy. My only complaint was the way she did it and the sloppy way she communicated it to me. For the years we spent together, I deserved better. I would probably have more respect for her if she came up to me and told me she was unhappy. Perhaps she could give me a chance to spice up our relationship and change our lives so that she could be happy. There was nothing I wouldn't do for her. But she decided to find another guy, sleep with him, and then tell me she wanted a divorce. And now she seems to want to talk things out and try to be friends. Fuck it, I can find my own friends. I called the manager of the complex and told him I would take the condo. It was move-in ready, so I'll have a check for it at first light, and I'd like to move in this weekend. When I kissed Lissa goodbye before she left to go back to her grandparents, I knew I would be okay. I remember when I was 8 years old and my parents forced me to take piano lessons. My piano teacher, Mrs. Lipscomb, taught me a rhyme so I could remember the lines from the staff. EGBDF, every good boy does fine. I've been trying to be a good boy my whole damn life. I'll be okay. At first, when Mel threw this at me, I didn't see a way out. Just suffering and loneliness, but I began to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I had problems, and I knew it. Greg used all the money from his savings account to buy himself a car. Over the past 2 weeks, I've started to question why I even want to be with him. It wasn't so bad that he moved into the house without asking. He began to use the house as a meeting place for all his friends. They came at any hour of the day or night, and many of his friends were women. Then he started bothering me that we don't really have an equal relationship. We did not share and share equally. He didn't understand why I could have this with Mel and not with him. So I gave him the key and foolishly gave him access to my bank account, and within a week he had completely emptied his savings account on a used Honda. I tried to explain to him how divorce apparently works. It looked like Mel was going to get his 60%. I agreed so I wouldn't be called an adulteress and Greg wouldn't be dragged into it. Mel also didn't want to give me any leeway with the house. We only had 2 weeks left before we left, and at the rate things were going, we wouldn't have enough money to build another house. I may have to move into an apartment. Even worse was the news that Mel was going to take a few months, or perhaps a couple of years, off work while he got over the depression our breakup had plunged him into. This meant he would have no income, so I probably wouldn't receive any child support. He even let his daughter down. From what I heard from my sister, Melissa was now living with my parents so she could provide emotional support for her father. Supposedly she was moving somewhere else this weekend, so he probably didn't give her enough money to stay on campus. However, last night was the worst. After trying to keep the house clean from the mess Greg and his friends seemed to leave everywhere, I went out onto the deck to relax a bit. I think I fell asleep. I woke up to someone tapping me on the shoulder. Of course it was Greg. He wanted me to please him. I was half asleep, so I just started doing it. That's when I noticed his friends were watching. "Greg!" I screamed, pushing away from him. "Come on, baby," he said. "There's nothing wrong with that." I couldn't remember seeing most of his friends with a girl, and all the women who came to visit Greg or his friends were available girls. If you really loved me and really wanted to be with me forever, you wouldn't have a problem with that, he said. I think you'll want me to move out next. Okay, I'll do it, I told myself. I didn't know if I did it because I really thought he was hurt, or because if I ended the relationship, it would mean I was throwing my marriage away for nothing. The next thing I did was give him pleasure. "Back to the PlayStation," he yelled, and they all walked back into the house, laughing. "I told you so," I heard him say. Later, when all his friends had left, Greg came into the bedroom. He didn't even bother to take a shower. I just took off my clothes and went to bed. I pretended to be asleep. He turned me over and started groping my breasts. At first, the thought of making love to a younger man did wonders for me. But lately I've been thinking, and I realized what the problem was. Greg didn't make love to me, we just had sex. It was a completely physical affair with no emotional connection, at least from his side. "No, Greg," I said. "Come on, baby, don't be like that," he said. "I'm not in the mood," I screamed. "Good night." "I bet you'd be in the mood if I were Mel, wouldn't you?" he barked. He then left the room, slamming the door. I'm not sure if I was relieved or upset that he left, but I really thought about his question, and I knew the answer. By then I began to realize that I was a fool. The only problem was that I didn't have an exit plan. Greg told me that he would start working in a few weeks, and after that things would get better for us. He needed a car to get to and from work and got a good deal on it. I got up about an hour after he left. I felt bad that we were fighting, and I wanted to talk about it. Our relationship was getting out of control. In some ways, it was the same as with Mel. In my marriage to Mel, I had to talk to him about my feelings. If I had done that, we might still be together. I swore I wouldn't make that mistake with Greg. Greg couldn't change unless I talked to him about the things I didn't like. We were from different generations and led different lifestyles. Conflicts were inevitable. I went down to the living room and heard a groan. It sounded like moaning. One of Greg's friends, God knows, had sex with some bitch in my house, I thought. When I walked into the room, I realized I was right, only it wasn't one of Greg's friends. There was a stocky blonde with glasses sitting on top of Greg. Greg lay back on the carpet with his hands behind his neck and just enjoyed it. The girl noticed me first. Her hand went up to her mouth and she stopped. "Don't stop, baby," Greg said. "He hasn't seen me yet." The girl pointed at me, and his gaze followed her outstretched finger. His eyes became larger, and his face became pale. He quickly pulled out from under the girl and came up to me, still naked. "I know you're upset," he said, "but it's really your fault. If you had given me sex when I wanted it, this would never have happened." I didn't say a word. I just turned around and walked out onto my deck. I sat down in one of the lounge chairs I had seen online and Mel painstakingly built, and painted them to make me happy. As I sat in the chair, I noticed that the other 3 chairs in the set had been thrown into the pool, and the chlorine had already begun to fade their color. Then I just started crying and praying that I would wake up, and it was all just a terrible dream. I fell asleep again there by the pool. The next morning I woke up and looked at the clock. I'm cold. I slept outside and Greg didn't come and wake me up. I was also late for my meeting with the lawyers to sign the final divorce agreement. I walked up to the house and the door was closed. Not just closed, but blocked. I started knocking on the door, and after about 10 minutes, the girl Greg had sex with last night let me in. She didn't say anything. She simply opened the door and left. She was walking up the stairs when I called her. "Where are you going?" I asked her. "Back to bed," she yawned sleepily. "You don't sleep in my room," I said. "Greg said I could," she spat. "Get out of my house or I'll call the police," I screamed. "Fuck you, Grandma," she barked. "I've been kicked out of better houses than this one. I'll be glad when Greg leaves you." I quickly took a shower and changed into more or less decent clothes. I noticed that someone had gone through my purse and all my money was missing. I jumped in the car and drove to Mel's lawyer's office. The person who introduced me was also there. I sat through about half an hour of legal nonsense and signed the papers as I was told. "The divorce will be final in 90 days, Mel's lawyer said. "Wait," I asked. "Where is my husband?" "You don't have a husband anymore," said Mel's lawyer, who was a big, mean woman. "But I still have 90 days to change my mind, right?" I asked. I knew I didn't need 90 days. I didn't need 90 damn minutes. I wanted Mel to come home and help me kick those bastards out of our house. I was under the impression that I would have to talk to Mel, I said. "Maybe it's not too late to change everything." "Perhaps it's my fault," my lawyer said. "In 90% of cases, although it is not necessary, both parties are usually present in case something goes wrong. That doesn't mean he had to be here. It was just expected. He won't come, said Mel's lawyer. He signed the papers 3 days ago. He doesn't want anything to do with you anymore. He's not even in town right now. He went on a cruise with his daughter. They call it the Freedom Cruise. I think you know why. I sat and looked at the woman. She seemed to take great pleasure in seeing me suffer. But what if I changed my mind? I stammered. They both looked at me and shook their heads. I could see that none of this mattered to them. They started putting papers in folders and briefcases and mostly just ignored me. I want to talk to Mel, I screamed. I want my husband back. I got the impression that none of them cared what I wanted. I was sure the woman was trying her best not to laugh at me. I grabbed her by the shoulders. She looked at my lawyer as if asking him if he saw me grab her. I got the impression that if I hadn't let her go, I would have been hurt. So I quickly retreated and tried a different approach. You are a woman, I said. Don't you have any sympathy for me? I've made a huge mistake. Can't you help me? Why would I want this? She asked coldly. Besides, I can't provide the type of help you need. She loudly slammed her briefcase on the table and turned to me. I rarely deal with men's divorce cases, she began. I prefer to defend women who have been unfairly treated by their spouses. I made an exception in the case of your husband because when I first saw him, he was in such pain that he reminded me of some of the worst women I have represented. I'm just shocked by what you did to him. If I hadn't helped him get out of this state, he probably would have just given you all his money and his house just to get rid of you. But, I started, her face took on a harsher expression. But nothing, she interrupted sharply. Do you know how many women there are out there who are abused by their husbands? They are cheated on, beaten, robbed, and ignored. Most of these women would die to have the man you just screwed up in their lives. You put that poor man through hell. Now he's finally free of you and starting to move on. But things aren't going well for you with your fun boy, so you decide you want your husband back. So what, bitch? Life moves on. She turned around, grabbed her briefcase, and then waved me to leave her office because she was leaving too. 3 weeks after signing the divorce papers, Melissa and I returned from the cruise and I started tinkering in my workshop. I remember it in the smallest detail. It was one of those moments that we just never forget. I don't know why I didn't think about this before. I had the idea to directly connect the servo controller to its own processor and sensor. I made 3 of them to test. The next day, I took one to one of my company's manufacturing plants. I worked with one of ours equipment repair technicians and connected it to a machine that was not working. That was great. My module gave the machine the ability to sense the proximity of objects around it and move to avoid them without having to program it. I thought I had found something worthwhile. I had a friend who worked in robotics. I gave him one of my modules as well. I returned home to finalize the remaining module I had, and within a few days I filed for my first patent. I was working with one of those companies that specialize in bringing your inventions to market, and things moved very quickly. Literally hundreds of companies wanted to license my patent, and even more were interested in purchasing pre-assembled modules. I had to hire a lawyer and an accountant. We created 2 small companies. One was involved in licensing my patent and everything else I came up with. Another was engaged in the production of modules. We outsourced the production work to a small local workshop that was struggling to make ends meet. My plan was to eventually buy the shop outright and keep the owner as manager. In less than 3 months, I had more money than I knew what to do with. Melissa and I moved into a house that was even larger than the one we shared with her mother. I lured Joyce away from my old company because I couldn't think of anyone I'd rather have as my assistant than her. Melissa also worked for me while continuing her studies. She began to think about changing her major from liberal arts to business. My father-in-law and mother-in-law, with whom I was still on good terms, were happy for our success. They called to invite us to Thanksgiving dinner. Bob told me I didn't have to worry, Melinda wouldn't be there. Ever since the fiasco at their anniversary when she brought that man, as they called Greg, she had no longer been welcome in their home. I agreed for both Melissa and me. After I hung up, I walked out to the pool where my daughter and a couple of her friends were sunbathing. Mel, just out of curiosity, have you heard from your mother lately? I asked. She got up and took me into the house, leaving her friends to sunbathe. Dad, she calls so often that I had to change our number, Melissa said. I don't know what's wrong with her. You gave her all this money. Hell, the money from selling the house alone should have allowed her to live fairly comfortably for 2 or 3 years while she looked for a job or went back to school. I don't know. What happened to her sanity? Now she lives in a crappy apartment downtown with Greg. Almost all her money is gone. I've heard terrible things about him and his friends from people I know at school who know them too. I looked at her seriously. Dad, hearing about this will only hurt you. Let's just live our lives. Besides, don't you have a date tonight? I smiled thinking about it. I was going on a 3rd date with a woman I met on a cruise. Even though we got along great on the ship, it took me a long time to contact her after we returned home. Most of this was my fault. I just couldn't think of a reason to call her. Finally, right after I settled the patent matter, she called me. It turned out that my curious daughter was tired of seeing me sullenly wandering around the condo all day and called her. Melanie Fitzgerald was a widow. Her husband died in service 5 years ago, before we met on a cruise. One of the things that connected us was that we had both lost someone we loved deeply. It was great for both of us, and we slowly came out of our shells together. By the time Melissa brought us back together, we both missed each other, but just didn't know how to connect. Our first date was the traditional dinner and movie. The second date was dancing at a club, and tonight we were going on a river cruise with dinner and more dancing. I hoped it would go as well as the first 2 dates. I especially enjoyed dancing with her. The sensations when she pressed against me told me that everything would be fine. I was kicked in the teeth by what Melinda did, but I got up and moved on with my life. I got into my Mustang and headed to Melanie's house. When I started the engine, the stereo came on and nearly blew my head off. Melissa drove my car to the store this morning and listened to one of her CDs. The song she was listening to was I Don't Want to Stop by Ozzy Osbourne. I turned the volume down just a little, then smiled and let her play. Either way, it was a great driving song. As I pulled away from the curb, I noticed another car approaching from the opposite direction. Even though I wasn't paying attention to her, I drove to Melanie's house with Ozzy screaming about how he didn't want to stop. All my life I've been on the edge. I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is that I don't want to stop. Yeah, you and me, Ozzy, I thought. I didn't notice until that moment, but the car, a brightly painted Honda, was following me. This car looked like something out of a circus. It was one of those cars that only a teenager who had watched Too Much Fast and the Furious could drive. The guy was probably following me, hoping I would agree to the race. When I arrived at Melanie's house, I got out of the car. I turned down the volume on the stereo because she lived in a nice neighborhood. Melanie wore a really cute gray velvet dress that showed off her curves beautifully. She stepped off her porch and literally ran towards me as soon as I got out of the car. She hugged me tightly and even kissed me. This was our first real kiss. I'm so excited about it, she said. Come on, I said. We've been on much bigger and probably much nicer ships together. Not a ship, dear, she said. It's being with you. I've missed you. I haven't seen you in 2 days, and after what happened on our last date, I'm still a little emotional. I think we'll have to rethink our policy of not seeing each other too often during the week. Talking to you on the phone is great, but it's not enough. We both turned around when we heard the car door slam behind us. Melinda got out of the clown Honda and quickly walked towards us. Get your hands off him, she screamed. I quickly stepped between Melanie and Melinda. Melanie Fitzgerald, this is my ex-wife, Melinda Harris, I said. This is Melinda Conrad, Melinda answered sharply. Can I talk to you, Mel? She asked. We have nothing to talk about, I said. I met all the terms of our divorce. You didn't get your alimony last week because your alimony ended 2 months ago. I was kind enough to send you one extra check last month, but that's it. There's nothing else between us. So if you'll excuse us. Mel, we will always have a connection. We have a daughter together, she said. Melissa is a grown woman, I said. Your relationship with her is none of my business. I cannot and will not try to influence her one way or another. But Mel, what if I made a mistake? She asked. Then you pick up the pieces and move on with your life, just like I had to, I said. I made a mistake. I chose the wrong woman to fall in love with. And it came back to bite me 20 years later. For a while, I didn't think I could handle it. But now my life is great again. You can get your life back together, too. Mel, we need to talk. There are a lot of things I need to tell you, she said. And I don't like the idea of you dating someone until we sort this out. I didn't like the idea of you sleeping with someone while we were still married, but it didn't seem to bother you. So what I do now that we're divorced is none of your business, Melinda. We have nothing to talk about. I opened the door and helped Melanie into her seat. Then I got into the car and drove away, leaving Melinda standing there. 2 weeks later, I was sitting at my desk thinking about an important problem. I wasn't sure if I was pushing things too fast with Melanie. What we had was great, but I wanted more. The door opened, and there she was. When I saw her walk into the office and walk towards me with that big, beautiful smile, I quickly tried to hide the papers I was working on under my desk. This was one of the problems I had. Melanie made me feel so special every time I saw her. It was as if seeing me just made her day. That was never the case with Melinda. Everything I did for Melinda, she took for granted. She never valued anything. Maybe this is what led to our separation the most. Well, that and her cheating with that guy. Are you trying to hide your adult movie from me, honey? Melanie asked, still smiling. You know what you don't need. Show me what you're so interested in. Whatever it is, I'll try it for you. Melanie had this way of just melting me. So when she leaned over and pulled out the papers I was trying to hide, I just let her take them. She looked at them, and what I was looking at came to her. I thought her smile was bright before, but it got even brighter. Mel, did you watch this for me? For us? She asked. I nodded. Do you really want me? She asked. I nodded again. She started crying and threw herself at me. My office chair couldn't withstand the impact and toppled over, scattering us both onto the floor. The noise attracted Joyce, who ran into the office and found us on the floor, hugging each other. I don't want to interrupt, but you should see this. Joyce chuckled. She led us both through the outer office and into the conference room. We looked into the lobby where about 20 people were applying to work with us. Some were office workers or secretaries. Others were interviewing for jobs in my sensor shop. Look, said Joyce. She pointed at Greg. HR flagged him because he claimed to be your friend. Well, in a way he is, I laughed. If it weren't for him, I'd still be married to Melinda. Should they hire him? She asked. Hell no, I said. Come on, Mel, let's go buy a ring. It all came to a head soon after I ran into my husband and that woman. I could barely hold on when I saw them together. He was still the same shy, caring man I fell in love with, the one I took for granted. But he seemed to glow. He was really happy. I could tell it even from the loud music he was listening to in that damn Mustang. And her body language was intimidating. She couldn't wait for him to even come to her door. How stupid can you be? Doesn't she know not to let a guy think you're too eager to see him? You lose your advantage this way. Before his car even stopped, she ran out of the house and attacked him. She rubbed against my husband like a cat in heat, and the dress she wore told me about her plans. This dress hugged every curve of her body. It was almost like it hugged every curve of Melvin's body. I could tell she intended to get him into bed as soon as she could. I approached them, deciding to separate them. I had to get him away from this woman before it was too late. In the morning, I decided to return it. I'll also have to get rid of Greg. What did I even see in him? I guess I was just a stupid, bored woman who thought she deserved better and thought her life was at a dead end. I threw away the best part of my life. After the first time I caught Greg cheating, I let him convince me that it was my fault for denying him sex. It just opened the floodgates. Greg now brought women home at least a couple of times a week. He said that we have an open relationship. He reminded me that when we first met, I was still having sex with Mel. He didn't seem to think that the fact that I was married to Mel mattered. Sex with Greg simply became an obligation. I think it was just the excitement of the newness that made it something special in the beginning. The final straw was last night after he finished with me. I noticed that one of his friends was watching us. Greg wasn't embarrassed or shocked and didn't even try to cover for me. "Do you want to try?" he asked. Before the man could answer, I stood up and got dressed. I left my apartment and went to my parents' house. It took some time, but I convinced them to let me in. I told them the whole story and they let me stay the night. While I was there, I noticed that new photographs had appeared on the mantelpiece. "These were made for Thanksgiving," my mom said as I looked at them. One of the photographs hit me in the heart. It was a photo of everyone at my parents' house for Thanksgiving dinner. At the center of the group of friends and family was a subgroup. Between my parents were Mel and this woman. Melissa was between them. They all hugged Melissa and were cheek to cheek. Mel and Mel are together again. They were all smiling and clearly having a good time. It was just like the photo we took when our family was together. It seems like my husband and daughter just found someone to replace me without any second thought. Even my own parents preferred their company to mine. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I looked at the photo. Everything in me screamed to throw this damn photo against the wall or into the fire. It took more strength than I thought I had just to put the photo back on the mantelpiece. I took great pains to make sure I put it back in the same position, if not the same spot. "What did you expect?" my dad asked from behind me. "I guess you thought they'd wait forever for you, huh?" "Dad, you didn't even invite me to Thanksgiving, but you invited her," I cried. "Honey, your boyfriend almost ruined our anniversary. You made it very clear that he was the man you wanted to be with, despite everything you were told. You even chose him over your own child to be with him. You let her leave that house. It sent a clear message to everyone that you thought being with him was more important than her or us. Melvin tried to avoid you. He let you have what you wanted. You can't blame him for trying to find someone he could be happy with. As for Thanksgiving, we told you on our anniversary that you couldn't bring that bastard you were with into our house, and you're still with him. We invited Mel to Thanksgiving because, no matter what, whether he is married to you or not, he is part of our family. He may not be your husband anymore, but he is still our son-in-law because he is the father of my granddaughter. And the woman he brought with him? He asked our permission first, unlike you who just came with your other bastard. Melanie is a wonderful lady. I like her very much. And if Melvin couldn't come back to you, she is exactly who I would want for him and for my granddaughter. She is polite, attentive, and helpful. She will always be welcome in this home when she comes. She's not you, Melinda. She's not my daughter. But Melvin also has the right to happiness. So we would be happy if he found it." "But Dad, I want him back," I screamed. He simply shook his head. "Melinda, judging by how they got along and what they talked about, it might be too late for that. Even if Melvin doesn't marry her, he still might not want to come back to you. You hurt him badly. Why would he want to be in this situation again? What about Melissa? You chose your comfort boy over your daughter. Any surprise why she isn't answering your calls?" Listening to their conversation, I realized that he was right. The next day, I returned to my small apartment and started cleaning. When Greg woke up, I told him that he and all his friends needed to leave. While I was cleaning, I found several late payment notices and a notice to vacate my apartment. I didn't even know they came. I gave Greg access to the bank account so he could pay the bills. He didn't pay any of them, and all the money was gone. He tried to find a job last week and was rejected outright. He told me that the company he wanted to work for turned out to be owned by Melvin. My husband became more successful within a year than I ever could have imagined. Unfortunately, he wanted nothing to do with me. I myself went to apply for a job with them yesterday. I sat down in the big room and filled out the form along with a lot of other people. When they started calling names, I had a good feeling about my chances. Many people I sat with who had no skills at all came back smiling and told us they got the job. As I was waiting to be called, I felt that look you get when someone looks at you. I turned to my left and looked through the large glass. My daughter was in the corridor outside the hall. She pointed at me while talking to another woman. The woman nodded several times and entered the hall where I was sitting. She walked over to the people who were conducting the interviews, and they sorted through their papers. The man at the desk immediately called me even though my number wasn't even next, and they called me by name. I walked into the interview room and sat down in front of the table. 3 people were sitting behind him. 2 of them were women. I felt even more confident in my chances. I was sure my daughter had pushed me forward in line, and who knows what could have happened if we had all worked together. Perhaps I would have my family back. "You have no work history," said one of the women at the table. She didn't ask a question, but simply stated what she saw on my resume. "Well, in a way, I have," I said. "I've been married for over 20 years to the man you all work for." "Mr. Conrad doesn't believe in nepotism," the man said. Both women shook their heads. "You also have no skills," said the other woman. "It says here that you have a university degree. Which university did you get your degree from, and what is it?" Melvin and I met in college," I said. "I got my degree from the same college as him, but it wasn't the same. I remember that for sure. Melvin probably remembers." "Thank you very much for coming this morning," the first woman said again. She stood up and extended her hand to me for a handshake. "Did I get the job?" I asked. "When do I start? What will I do? Will I work with my husband and daughter?" "We still have a lot of people to interview before we make a final decision on any position," the man said. "Someone will contact you anyway." He also stood up and extended his hand to me. I got the impression that what they said was just politeness. What they really meant was, "Don't call us, we'll get back to you." When I left the room, I realized that I was the first one who was not hired. I turned around and saw Melissa talking to the people who had just interviewed me. She nodded her head and, without throwing a single glance at me, walked away in another direction along the corridor. My own daughter just ruined my chances of getting a job. I had only one choice left. I needed a place to live and money for food. I would be too embarrassed to go back and live with my parents. I had to apply for government assistance. After all the years Mel and I paid taxes, they owed me it. Melinda Conrad, hearing my name, brought me out of my thoughts. I walked into the office while the woman looked over the forms I had filled out. "How much will I get?" I asked. "Mrs. Cadiz Conrad, what was your income last year? Have you received any amounts of money or payments in the last 12 months? Your finances are very poorly described here. What assets do you have? Are you responsible for any children? It says here that you recently got divorced. Did you receive any alimony or monetary settlement for this?" "Well, I had 6 months of child support, and I got $80,000 from the sale of our house, plus 40% of our checking and savings accounts," I said. The woman looked at me. "Are you joking?" she asked. "No," I said. "You blew over $80,000 in less than a year and expect. Get out of my office." I stood there, stunned and offended. My whole world seemed to collapse. I had lost my family, my home, my job, and now when I asked for the help I needed most, I was turned away with contempt. I left the office feeling more lost and desperate than ever. My daughter Melinda walked into the office just as I was about to leave for Melanie's going-away party. Melanie wanted to work until the end of the month so she wouldn't leave her boss in the lurch, but we both decided she didn't need to work anymore. If she just needed something to do to keep herself busy, we had plenty to do here. Besides, Melanie is only 36 and I'm 41. Perhaps we could try to give Melissa a brother or sister. "Hey, honey," I said, picking up my jacket. "Are you going to Melanie's going-away party?" "Of course, Dad, I won't miss it," she said. I just wanted to show you this." She handed me an application that was stamped, "Rejected." "You couldn't," I laughed. "I did it," she laughed back. I just kissed her on the cheek and shook my head as I headed to my new wife's party. I loved my life again. Everything was as it should be. I no longer felt any anger or pain towards my ex. Looks like my daughter is still doing it. Rejection can be hard. Honestly, I would be happy to hire Melinda and keep her close to where we work, just so she can see us regularly and see what she's missing. They say the best revenge is a life well lived. I would be glad if Melinda could see how we live. It would be like a daily reminder of what she had lost every time she looked at us. I didn't seek revenge or do anything bad to Melinda. I just let karma deal with it. I focused on being a good person and making myself happy. As I walked out the door, I was momentarily confused trying to find my car. In the parking lot next to the building were two nearly identical Mustangs, parked close to the building in management spaces. It took me a second to realize which one was mine. It was even worse at home, since Melanie now also drove the exact same car. Then suddenly I realized which one was mine. It was easy to find out actually. Mine was the one whose license plate read Egdef.